All right, music fans, welcome back. It is I, Dave, the real music observer, observing real music in real time for real people just like you right there and just like me right here. Today, I'm just going to go out on a limb and tell you I think the Doobie Brothers are the best American band ever. Because a couple of times I've done Doobie type videos and people really don't pay much attention to them. Uh, I don't know, maybe it's because I cut my teeth on some 80s stuff and the Doobs weren't really that big in the 80s, although they were big at the beginning of the decade and again at the end of the decade, so I'm not sure. Guess they're more of a 70s band. Their catalog, their Warner Brothers catalog, and let me try to argue as to why I think they're the best, because they combine pretty much every single traditional element of American music, whether it be blues, rock, pop, soul, country, bluegrass, R&B, old school R&B, like the Stax catalog kind of stuff. Um, I just got through listening to the Vices album, which I shortened the title a little bit. Um, and there is just some blatant, wonderful R&B flavored blues rock kind of songs on that thing, and it just warms your soul to hear so much depth uh, in music. Because when you don't listen to that stuff and you put on the radio these days, you think to yourself that music is dead, but that's why they recorded the stuff so it would live on for eternity. But the Doobies' first album, which a lot of people don't even know about, they don't know it exists. They think it's like The Captain and Me or Toulouse Street. Those are the two first albums and so forth. But there's one prior, and that's the one that got them the record deal. They released a tune called Nobody, which they redid on their World Gone Crazy album, and a lot of people weren't familiar with Nobody, but it was a great song on the first album, and it was a great redo. But the point being is that this band, they combined all these elements. A lot of people just thought, hey, they're a good bar band with some bluesy elements. Tom Johnson talks a lot about his influences, and they're all pretty much blues-based guys. But then he certainly likes a lot of the soul music as well. Same with Patrick Simmons. By the way, the Michael McDonald era, I'm okay with it. I'm still more inclined to listen to the Tom Johnson stuff, but I listen to it all now because I appreciate what Michael McDonald brought to the table. He certainly alienated probably a lot of the biker crowd, we'll say that, but he brought in some other people and obviously helped the band win some Grammy Awards on Minute by Minute. Uh, Tom Johnson, of course, suffered from exhaustion, ill health, all that stuff. He had some stomach issues. I think he was burning the candle at both ends, if you ask me, working too hard and probably partying just as hard. And when Michael McD came along, he took control of things, maybe to the point where a lot of the fans were alienated. But I cut my teeth really on both versions of this band. Just tremendous talent. Jeff Skunk Baxter, by the way, is sort of the common element between the Tom Johnson and the Michael McDonald bridging the gap, and then Skunk would eventually be the guy that would drive Michael McDonald crazy. And Michael basically asked Skunk to leave the band and said it's either him or me, and it ended up being him because, hey, he was a player, and he's a great musician, by the way. But I guess he's kind of a taskmaster and a slave driver. That's why he's working in government ops now and so forth. If you look up his profile, it's like he's a Renaissance man or something. But getting back to this whole thing as to why I think they're the best American band, because they combine every single element and then they're accessible. I talked about Little Feat. They do that as well, but they're more extreme and they take liberty here and there, and they're not quite as radio friendly as the Doobie Brothers have been their entire career. You can listen to any of those older Warner albums whether it's Stampede or Toulouse Street or Taking It to the Streets or Living on the Fault Line or, obviously Minute by Minute or even One Step Closer. And it's a listening experience that starts at the beginning and ends at the end. There's really not a lot of filler on these albums. And if you think it's filler, it's probably because you haven't spent enough time with it. Yours truly has listened to all those albums numerous times, the remasters and the better mixes and so forth, and it just gets better and better with time. Especially when you put the backdrop of today's music behind what the Doobie Brothers accomplished. And even recent Doobie Brothers albums like World Gone Crazy and Sibling Rivalry, both of those are just fantastic albums. And then the late 80s, you had Cycles and then Dangerous, and all of that stuff was just perfect. It's as if they hadn't left. They changed the production style a little bit. But, Tom Johnson came back and recaptured that magic that he had back on things like China Grove and Listen to the Music. I mean, you can hear it. And Patrick Simmons, by the way, has been a constant throughout this entire band's career. Now, they're out on the road again this year. They're out on the road every year. Look at all their peers who've been inducted around them. Bands that started, more or less around the same time or at least peers, like I say, Chicago. You can look at the Beach Boys. They're different from the Doobie Brothers, but I'm looking at quintessential American bands. Eagles, obviously, are going to be a contemporary as they both pretty much entered the music scene at the same time. The Eagles have been in the Hall of Fame since, 1999, I think? And the Doobies are still waiting. It's 2018. Holy crap, Batman. The Doobies, more consistent than the Eagles. I'm just throwing it out there. The Eagles put out a lot of great stuff, but I'm talking about a listening experience where you're not interrupted by a song that's kind of filler. The Eagles didn't get good at that until Hotel California, and that's their most, cogent album. Even the long run is somewhat uneven. And then this Long Road out of, Walmart album, that was very uneven and all over the place. So they didn't really solve that problem. You could say On the Border was good and so forth. And there are other, One of These Nights is closer. But I can put on Stampede and not hear a bad song. And Stampede isn't like the big name brand Doobie Brothers album. But I can just pick one from the Warner years. Their first album, which nobody's ever heard, plays very well from start to finish. And I just, who would you induct? How many guys? I would induct the Taking It to the Streets lineup. That's what I would induct, because you still had Tom Johnson hanging around, and he needs to get in, obviously. He should be one of the first guys to get in. Michael gets in, Pat gets in, Tyran Porter gets in. I mean, whether it's Hosek or Hartman on drums, either one of those guys or both of them should get in posthumously for, I believe, Hosek. I'm not sure if Hartman's still with us either, but the point being is this is a band that had all kinds of things going on in it as far as style, as far as the fact they were on the radio and doing well on the radio and made their comeback in the late 80s and so forth. And they've just produced some of the finest American music ever made. So, I know that might be a surprise to some people, but, I've thought this through. I did a couple of other videos about the Doobie Brothers, and all I can tell you is they're great. They're great. If you haven't listened to them, or you've got an 80s bias, or you're just not into the Doobs, I tell you, man, that's the stuff I cut my teeth on. When I first started buying albums, it was Minute by Minute and One Step Closer, and then I was buying things backwards. I got Taking It to the Streets, and I got Vices, and I got, The Captain and Me, and I was introduced to a whole different but a whole other great Doobie Brother band. And I think, number one, they need to be in the Hall, and number two, I think they've made the best American music possible. So that's it. I'm done with this video. Doobie Brothers, Numero uno in my book. I'll talk to you soon, everybody.